Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women's Alpine Adventure Club. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am super excited about tonight's talk. We've got a real treat for you. We actually had a run through with Priti on Friday, and it's just such amazing content, and what that woman has done in the past year is just a fantastic achievement and really interesting story. So I can't wait to get Priti on and share that with you guys. I guess one thing I would say is, just so you're aware, Priti is actually joining us from Hawaii right now. So, so we've been able to chat to her already this evening, and things seem to be working fine, but we have had a few internet connectivity glitches and Wi-Fi issues when we've been talking to her. So it might be that she needs to kill her video at some point, or it might be that she cuts out. And certainly we have experienced a little bit of a time lag sometimes. So when we get onto the Q&A a bit later, if we have to be a bit patient while we wait for her responses, please bear that in mind. But she is very much with us, so we shouldn't have too much of a problem. So that was the disclaimer over. And just to tell you a little bit about us, for those that don't know, the Women's Alpine Adventure Club is really about making the alpine environment accessible to more women. And we do that in a number of ways, one of which is we have in-person get-togethers, actual club meets. If people can remember what getting together face-to-face looks like. If you can't, it's kind of like the wintry picture down the bottom and the summer picture in the middle there were from our events here in the Ekran National Park in the summertime and in Hempstead last winter. We actually managed to squeeze in a winter event just before lockdown. And then since then, we haven't done anything in person, which is why we have been on the internet in evenings like these to hopefully bring you a bit of cheer in lockdown and to keep all of our alpine adventures alive. So these events are totally public. Then we have obviously our private members meets where we get together, just the women, and in those sessions we do skill sharing between members, but also we invite guides to come in and give us skills workshops so we can all learn and develop together. And then also on the website, we've got everybody who's ever talked for us. We had a brilliant summer season. So if you want to hear about adventures in Greenland and Patagonia, then you can go onto our website and you can download and listen to all the previous talks. And also we've got loads of alpine advice from guides and budding enthusiasts, everything from crevasse rescue techniques to top tips from guides, etc. So do check out our website content because it's really useful for everybody and hopefully some great tools and tips there. So that's it about us. That's the sales spiel over with. And then I'm sure I'm going to come on to etiquette now. And I kind of feel like this slide's a bit old now. We put that in last year when I think Zoom was pretty new to everyone. And now I feel in this brave world, we pretty much only communicate through the internet. So I'm not going to kind of, treat you all like idiots, but just to say, we have muted all your mics, and that's just because we have found if there's loads of noise as people are coming on, it can be distracting for the speaker. So what we'll do is we'll keep everyone muted and videos off. The team here will have their videos on so that Priti doesn't feel like she's speaking to a black hole. But then we have plenty of time for Q&As at the end. And when that happens, we'll talk you through it. But you can raise your hand. And if you're shy, you can just put something in the chat. But if you'd like to show us your face, which would be amazing, then you can feel free to put your video on and put your audio on and say hi to Priti and ask your question yourself. And then finally just to say that all the talks are recorded. We're now on Facebook Live, so please do not swear unless you want to. And then that's it for this slide, I think. I'm on my iPad, so I can't do it myself. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny now, who's going to introduce Priti for us.
Great, thanks Louise. Welcome everyone. We're super excited to have Priti Wright with us this evening. We actually started talking to Priti back at the beginning of the year, and she wrote a fantastic article for us about her climb in Patagonia before they headed out to Pakistan, and we wanted to have her speak in our original summer series of talks, but they were jetting off, so we couldn't quite fit her in. So we're so happy that we've kept in touch, and we've got her talking now, and now she's a bit of an international superstar after climbing the first ascent of K6 Central over in the Karakoram. And Priti's also going to be talking to us about her sabbatical with her husband Jeff in the photo as well, and how they took a year off from their engineering day jobs and started to put together a pretty impressive tick list. So Priti, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to join us now by turning on your camera and your mic, hopefully there aren't any internet gremlins between here and Hawaii, and we can welcome you. Hello.
Hello.
Fantastic.
I guess you can see me and hear me. Hello, everyone around the world. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Women's Alpine Adventure Club for having me. I'm so honored to be here and speaking to you because I'm in the amazing company of Margot, Talbot, etc., everyone else who is going to be presenting with the Women's Alpine Adventure Club. Like I was saying, like Jenny was saying, this is me and my husband Jeff on the summit of K6 Central this season, when we made the first ascent of it in October. It's a 7,155 meter peak in the Pakistani Karakoram, and it was our first time to the Karakoram and the first ascent of this peak. Let's see if I can. So my husband and I have been climbing together for about 7 years, and we've been married for 8 years. We started climbing with the Boeing Alpine Club, or BOEALPS, which is an alpine club, made by Boeing, but non-Boeing employees are also allowed to join. So we started out through this club, taking a couple of courses and doing mountaineering with our friends. I'm a software developer and Jeff is an aerospace engineer with Boeing, of course. And the situation was that we had 9-to-5 jobs. We're not sponsored. We're just like weekend warriors, but maybe weekend warriors on steroids. We have 3 weeks of vacation, but endless stoke. And we just wanted to go climbing more. So what we would do is we'd optimize our 3 weeks of vacation a year and do smash and grab trips. And we had a lot of success with these smash and grab trips, including some of these, maybe you've heard of them, the Cassin Ridge on Denali. We climbed it in 10 days from Seattle to Seattle. And then some other trips like all along the Watchtower in the Bugaboos, which is in Canada, BC, 4 days from Seattle to Seattle. And we also climbed an incredible link up in the Southern Pickets, which is in the North Cascades. And the tricky thing about this is it usually has bad weather. So we're always watching the weather. And then when we saw a good window coming up, we just took some time off of work and went and climbed it. The trouble with this is that we could only climb certain objectives that we could reach from Seattle and could fit into our allotted vacation, which wasn't a whole lot. And our friends, Chris Mutzel and Jimmy Voris, gave a presentation at one of our local climbing shops, and they talked about their time that they took off of work and traveled around the world. This is them climbing Exocet in Patagonia, and it was so inspiring. The gears just started turning in our heads, and we were like, how can we do this ourselves? So we'd always wanted to travel the world together, and we were worried about leaving our jobs. We didn't know how this would work out. If we took time off, would we be able to get our jobs back? How would that impact retirement? But we watched a TED Talk. I mean, how many great stories start with, oh, I watched a TED Talk, I listened to a TED Talk. Sounds a little boring. But this one was actually really inspiring because it talks about how you can intersperse sabbaticals during your whole working career. Because the only time that it's too late to actually take a sabbatical is after you're dead. Then it's too late, you can't do it. So putting off retirement for a little bit, a couple of years, but taking the time now when we're healthy, fit, young, have chance to bounce back, that's the time to do it. Take the adventure, take the initiative, and start planning. So we decided to take a gap year from our jobs, leave them for a year, so that we could climb and travel around the world. But how do we take a sabbatical? The first step that we needed to do was to decide what we wanted to do when we were taking this year off. So we made a prioritized list of all the things we wanted to do. Then we started saving up and actually sticking to a budget, which was pretty hard for 2 years to be able to save up enough money to travel around the world. But we buckled down and we made a plan, and then we started to execute on the plan. So we have a bunch of goals. Obviously, we have non-climbing goals and climbing goals. It's easy to have climbing goals. Everyone's like, oh, I want to climb this amazing, beautiful peak that has been on my dream wish list for a really long time. But there's also non-climbing goals that just help round out the whole experience, like absorbing culture, learning new languages, learning how to do a handstand. That was a big one. Learning how to paraglide, and just, you know, building our relationship together as well. Because life isn't just one-dimensional. Climbing is awesome. It has so many dimensions to it, but there's more to it as well. So some of our climbing goals are here. We had goals in Patagonia, in the Alps, and we had a BHAG. Maybe you haven't heard of this technical term before, but it stands for Big Hairy Ass Goal. And it's the goal that seems like a little too big, a little too much to bite off, but how incredible would it be to go and accomplish something like that? So you always have to have like that pie in the sky sort of dream, just in case, something to really motivate you to go do something bigger than you ever thought you could do before, because dream big, why not? Of course, we had many climbing goals. The two big ones in Patagonia were Cerro Torre and Fitz Roy on the right-hand side of the screen. And then the next thing that we wanted to do was to climb the 6 Alps north faces. And perhaps you've heard of them. I hadn't heard of them before, being from America, but when I first heard about it, it was from Gaston Rebuffa's book, Étoile et Tempête. I'm probably screwing that one up, but it means starlight and storm. And what a beautiful name. It just immediately captured my attention. And these are classic, amazing routes that were put up in the 1930s. And they're test pieces still today in a whole bunch of different areas. Some of them are like higher altitude, but easier and longer. Some of them are hard rock climbing, and some of them are tricky mixed / ice climbing. And they're all in slightly different areas and take different conditions to go and accomplish. So I had also heard about this when Tom Ballard soloed all 6 of these great north faces in one season in winter. And wow, that's pretty badass. And so I was pretty motivated to go do that. But all of these climbs are building up to K6, which is a 7,000 meter peak in Karakoram in Pakistan. And K6 Central was unclimbed, and K6 West had only seen 2 previous ascents. So that was the BHAG, the big hairy ass goal. And we'll see how that goes. So in December, so we have these goals. We're planning on going on this year off, and we're saving up, but we still had time and a little bit of extra buffer so that we could still go do some climbing in the meantime. We couldn't let our fitness and training lag too much. So in January of 2019, we flew to Patagonia and climbed Fitz Roy in 9 days from Seattle to Seattle. And this is 4 days from El Chalten to El Chalten. El Chalten is the starting town that all of the Patagonia climbs are done from. And you can see in the background of this picture, Cerro Torre peeking out from behind us. And we had attempted Cerro Torre in 2016, and we failed on that attempt because it was too late in the season, and we just knew we had to get revenge. When we got to the top of Fitz Roy, we saw it peeking up behind us, and I was like, oh, we have to go get that one. We have to go get our revenge. But before we could go get our revenge and go start on our sabbatical, we had to get a bunch of our stuff together. So this is all like your housekeeping things for taking a year off. We set up a virtual mailbox, which means any mail sent to our house was scanned, and then we could check it from anywhere in the world. We put our vehicle in storage. We rented out our place, put all our stuff in storage. We got visas for Pakistan and a long stay visa for France so that we could stay there for longer than 3 months. We, of course, updated our wills and got high altitude medications and antibiotics and traveler's insurance and medical evac. Oh, and this is a picture of us climbing on the Eiger, the final summit ridge. So with Fitz Roy in 2019 and Cerro Torre peeking up behind us, we knew we had to go back. And then we flew out to Patagonia December 2019, and during a couple of incredible weather windows, got to summit Cerro Torre. And this is a pretty incredible shot we got during the amazing weather window. There were so many people on this mountain during this weather window, but because it was the best weather window for climbing this peak because it was still kind of snowy and cold, so the rock climbing routes weren't really in good condition. But Cerro Torre and the Ragni route is an ice climbing route, and it's somewhat moderate, so a lot of people were on this route, and it's a super classic route too, so everyone really wanted to climb it. But you can see us, we're on the very top on the summit there, and we got the shot along with a bunch of other footage with our drone. So at the end I'll have a link on Vimeo so you can see some of the other footage that we got. Sorry, there's a bit of lag here. So we got some incredible weather in February, and along with Cerro Torre, which is shown in the bottom picture, we also climbed Aguja Poinsino and Aguja Rafael Juarez. And Fitz Roy is also shown here just for your reference that we climbed in 2019. We had already previously summited the leftmost and the rightmost peaks on the top image, Aguja de la S and Aguja Guijame. And we also made attempts on the second innermost peaks, Mermoz and Saint-Exupéry, but we still have to go back to get those. I also got a Live Your Dream grant to go climb Cerro Torre, so it was extra incredible to be able to go be on the summit and hold up the flag and everything and tell everyone, we did it! We actually accomplished this amazing goal. So we were super happy with our success in Patagonia. This was a great season for us, super incredible. But we had already planned on flying to France March 2nd. So instead of waiting around to see if there's going to be another weather window, we flew out to Chamonix just as planned. And we arrived in Chamonix, France on March 3rd. And so I got to check off 2 of these climbs, super cool. And then the goal in the Alps was to climb the 6 Alps north faces that I just talked about. And here's a map that shows each of the faces, each of the peaks We've got Petit Dru and Grandes Jorasses, which are right near Chamonix, where we were based out of. And then we have the Eiger and the Matterhorn in Switzerland, Piz, which is on the border of Switzerland and Italy, and then Cima Grande, which is in the Dolomites in Italy. And here's a picture, maybe you can pick them out in the bottom left of these 6 north faces. And these north faces are classic even today. And they're just a test piece of alpinism. So right before we traveled to Chamonix, we were watching the weather and watching conditions for the Eiger. And one thing that we like to do is to watch Instagram and watch hashtags to see if people are climbing the routes that we want to see, that we want to climb, and see if they're in condition. And we had seen that several people had made ascents of the classic North Face route, the 1938 Heckmeyer route that winter. So we knew that it was in okay climbable conditions. And then when we arrived in Chamonix, amazingly, a great weather window showed up. So we immediately left to go climb this route, and we got it done. This picture is actually from the Traverse of the Gods, and we made there. It was pretty cool, actually. One of the more exposed places I've slept. So everybody knows what happens, what comes next. We got put into lockdown because of COVID. So we spent 8 weeks in Chamonix, looking out our window at Mont Blanc on the left and watching some of the best weather we had ever seen roll on by. So we were pretty excited to get out and go climbing. Who could have ever predicted that on our planned year off, we would have a virus coming from China strike across the globe? But what can you do? You can't ever predict the future. As soon as lockdown was lifted, we raced out the door. The trains were shut down still, so we went on foot to go climb Petit Dru. And the route on Petit Dru is the Alain Leninger. The conditions weren't exactly ideal. It was still a bit wintry, but we didn't really care at that point. We're like, we gotta go climb. We've spent too much time waiting around in our rooms. So we went out and got it done. Petit Dru was probably one of the harder ones we did just because it was not in the best conditions when we climbed it. And then after we climbed Petit Dru, we spent some time focusing on a non-climbing goal, paragliding. And we spent at least a month learning how to paraglide. We took 2 courses with Alpwind, and they're based in Chamonix, and they taught us everything that we could have wanted to learn about paragliding around in the alpine environment. And we got these amazing single skin paragliders, and just so we could learn to fly off and down off of peaks. So they're optimized for going down, not necessarily for staying up. And then we were watching weather on the Matterhorn, and conditions weren't exactly ideal. They were pretty snowy. So when we got up there, we went up to the Hornley hut and actually waited a couple of days for some of the snow to melt off and conditions to become a little bit better. And luckily the weather was holding out, and we went and climbed the Matterhorn via the Schmid route on the north face. And the Matterhorn is actually the tallest of the peaks there, but it's not necessarily the hardest route. And we climbed down the Hornley Ridge. You can see the Hornley Ridge behind my paraglider. And at the bottom of the Hornley Ridge is the Hornley hut. And we paraglided down from there back to Zermatt. And that was just a super, super cool way to finish another North Face climb. And we did that in June. And then after that, in July, we went to the Italian Dolomites and climbed Cima Grande. This climb has quite a different feel to the Matterhorn or Eiger, or even Petit Dru for that matter, at least when we climbed it, because this is more of a rock climb. It's something that you can do without wearing many, many layers. We climbed it in a day from the car, and it was just a lot of fun after all the cold that we had been experiencing. And then barely a few days later, we were watching for conditions on Grandes Jorasses, and we saw the first season ascent of the Walker Spur, which was the route we wanted to climb in the north face. And we're pretty excited. We're like, okay, conditions are good, let's go out and check it. And the next good weather window happened to line up with a weekend. So everyone was out there. Everyone who wasn't working, who took the weekend off, was out there climbing it with us. So there are many, many parties en route. But we climbed it in a day, and even though there were many, many people going up, we brought our paragliders to the summit and we flew off from the top. So we were probably the first ones back down. We got to skip all of that gnarly descent. Unfortunately, in the Mont Blanc area in July, you can't fly over the Mont Blanc area. You have to fly towards Courmayeur. So we landed in Courmayeur, but it was pretty fantastic. And then barely a couple days later, we summited Grandes Jorasses on July 18th. And then July 21st, we summited our Petit Dru, the final of the 6 north faces. The weather can be actually pretty fickle, so we went up to the hut and watched the weather from there, and every day a thunderstorm would roll in the afternoon. But we watched for the best weather day and we decided, okay, we've got to get this done. We have to leave Chamonix soon, so let's just climb as fast as we can. So we climbed the route starting in the pre-dawn hours, climbed it as fast as we could, and right as we reached the summit, 2 other parties converged to the summit, climbing other routes, and a thunderstorm came. And my hair was standing on end, there was thunder all around us, and luckily there's a little hut on the very summit of Petit Dru, and all 6 of us crammed into this tiny little hut that had exactly 6 bunks. And we waited in there as 2 thunderstorms rolled past. And we opened the doors, the sun was shining again, and we all went back down. It was just quite the meeting of ways of a bunch of different people. And so with that, we got to check off, amazingly, the 6 great Alps north faces. I actually didn't think it was going to be possible. What with COVID shutting us down for 8 weeks, then potentially shut us down later, we extended our trip in Chamonix, and amazingly, it all got done. And we had been planning on taking a Karakoram expedition in Pakistan, and we're still in contact with our tour operator this whole time to make sure that the status of Pakistan was going to open again for tourism. And when it did, in the beginning of September, we stayed in contact and got fresh COVID tests, and then we flew to Islamabad. We were pretty determined to continue with our trip. This was our first trip to the greater ranges, to anywhere in the Himalaya, and we knew it was going to be an adventure, but we didn't know what extra sort of hurdles there would be to jump over with COVID. And as it turns out, it was very smooth. We were some of the only tourists in the country, and everything went so quickly, so smoothly. We flew into Islamabad, and then without even leaving the airport, our tour operator, Ali Saltoro, met us at the airport, and then we caught a plane and flew to Skardu in the matter of a couple of hours. So it's probably one of the smoothest trips possible to get from Chamonix, France to base camp in the Karakoram. You can see how empty the plane was. And then on the right-hand side is all of our luggage plus Colin Haley's luggage. Colin Haley decided a week before we left that he wanted to come join our expedition, and we were so excited to have him because he's been to the Karakoram 7 times. This was his 7th trip, and this was our first trip, and we thought, what better way to get a bunch of experience than to have him come join us. And he was only coming to climb solo objectives, but all of his experience and his awesome company at base camp was super valuable. So we flew out to Islamabad on September 23rd, and we hiked up to base camp And here is a map of K6, just for reference. K6 is in Pakistan, which is on the northwest side of India, and the Karakoram is part of the Greater Himalaya Range. Just to orient you a little bit, K6 is the 88th tallest mountain on Earth, and it's the 40th highest in Pakistan. And K6 Central was our objective. It was an unclimbed peak over 7,000 meters. And depending upon the list you're looking at, it's the 20th highest unclimbed peak on Earth. But it depends upon the list because its prominence from the other two peaks on K6 is only about 200 meters. So here's a map of where K6 is with reference to other peaks like K2. Skardu is the city that we flew into, and then we drove along the highway to Conde. And Conde is the nearest village to start the hike up to base camp. You can see in red where we drove and then hiked up to base camp. And it's so difficult, even though we were planning this trip for about 2 years and researching the whole area, trying to understand the topography, it's very complicated to understand which peak is which when you're finally out there, how everything is laid out. When you talk about a peak in the Alps or in the Cascades, for example, you'll say, oh yeah, it's Mount Stewart, and people know what you're talking about. They know which peak it is, they can picture it in their minds, they know which valleys it's surrounded by. But when you say something like Changui Tower in the Karakoram, people are like, oh, which peak is that? I don't really know. And then you say, oh, it's a sub-peak of Amen Brock. And they say, oh, there are like 10 sub-peaks of Amen Brock. Which one is it? So it's pretty difficult to wrap your head around the topography that's super complex of these crazy mountains out here. In orange is Conde, the nearest town. Red is where base camp was, and we spent 2 months at base camp. Originally, we had planned on being at base camp from July until September, and then because of COVID, everything was pushed back. So we arrived September and stayed through October. Or yeah, arrived in August, stayed through September, October. And you can see in pink is K6, our primary objective, and then in blue are other secondary objectives that we wanted to check out, including Jufika, Amen Brock, Chingu Charpa, and Karada and Kapura. The topography is just so incredible here. Here's a picture of K6, the south face of K6. So this is the valley that we're heading up. It's called the Nangma Glacier, and there's a East Nangma and a West Nangma. And then Central is the unclimbed peak. Main was firm and hasn't actually seen a repeat since the first ascent, which was 50 years ago. And then K6 West is on the left-hand side, which was first climbed by Ian Wellstead and Raphael Slavinsky, actually from the other side, which is the Charakusa side. And then the second ascent was made by Graham Zimmerman and Scott Bennett. And Central hadn't been climbed before. So the team, this is the base camp team. Starting from the left to the right, it's Jeff, my husband, me, Colin Haley, Azar, our cook, Ali Saltoro, our expedition manager, Captain Zoheb, our liaison officer, and Isaac, our base camp manager and cook. And we had a liaison officer because this area is pretty close to the border with India, and the whole border is contested. And it's required to have a liaison officer to make sure we're not up to anything fishy. It's more for protecting the border than protecting us, but it goes both ways. If we did get in trouble, then he would be able to help a little bit, contact some people. And so we settled in as a family for a couple of months. Super, super amazing to spend all this time with these amazing people. This is Xingu Charpa. We did some base camp Xingu Charpa, which was first climbed, well, okay. Josh Wharton and Kelly Cordes nearly made the full ascent of the North Ridge, which is pictured here, in 2006. And we made an attempt on it just to check out the beginning and see how it was. And boy, those guys are hard climbers. We bailed after only 8 pitches because it was run out, dirty, and hard. So major kudos to them. So after spending a couple of weeks at base camp, we went higher to acclimate more. On the left-hand side is Kapura, and on the right-hand side is the west face of K6. So we went to acclimate more on Kapura, and we climbed high, but then I kind of fell ill. But we got some amazing views of K6. And especially we got great views of the west face here and identified a couple of lines, variations to the route that Graham Zimmerman and Scott Bennett climbed. And I think that helped us a lot with these with this climb, because we got to avoid some of the hardest mixed climbing and climb straight up the face instead. And this was the same face that they rappelled in their ascent. And they made 19 60-meter V-thread rappels just down this face alone. This is the approach up to K6, up the Nangma Valley. And you can picture this valley kind of like being in Yosemite Valley. There's these super steep walls on either side of you, as if you're walking right next to the nose. And then parked at the very end of the valley is a Denali-sized mountain. So the scale of everything is just kind of mind-blowing. It's massive. This is Jeff sitting at ABC, and the route that we took is drawn in green on K6. K6 Central is in the very middle. So we started up this initial ramp and then camped, and then the route jumps over the other. And whenever the slide updates, this is our route on K6 on the west face. We got this picture from Kapura, so you can tell how useful it is to be exploring other peaks nearby, so you can climb high and get like a different perspective on the peak that you actually want to climb. So this is the final line that we ended up taking, and it was about 900 meters of continuous climbing in one day, which is quite a lot of front pointing. And we simul climbed it together in about 5.5 long pitches. The pink line is the line that Graham Zimmerman and Scott Bennett climbed. And you can see it's pretty ledgy, but there's really hard mixed climbing in certain points. So our line, even though it was a lot of steep front pointing, avoided this harder mixed climbing. And it was a more direct line. And Colin Haley was pretty essential in helping us pick out this line. We explored these 2 other lines in blue. And I was pretty hesitant at first to take the green line, which was the one Colin was most, he seemed to think it was the easiest route, and he was right. Trust someone who has so much experience. But we were a little worried about climbing for so long. And we did end up getting to camp around midnight, so it was pretty cold at that point. You can see in this picture our camp 1 on a nice flat snow shoulder called Sunny Knob. And this was pretty late in the season to be doing a 7,000 meter peak. Days were getting really short, and it was getting pretty darn cold. Another thing that added to the difficulty is the jet stream parked itself right over K6, and we had something like 40 km/h winds, pretty sustained once we got over 6,500 meters. And it's pretty hard to climb in really cold conditions and also have the wind just blasting you constantly the whole time. In this picture, you can see Amenbrock on the left and Driffica on the right. These are two other popular and amazing peaks to climb in the area. And for reference, the highest thing that we had climbed before K6 was Denali, which is only 6,190 meters. And other peaks like the Matterhorn and the Eiger, the Matterhorn is only 4,478 meters, and Eiger is actually under 4,000 meters tall. But K6 Central is 7,155 meters. And we got the GPS out and recorded that too. So it was quite a lot higher. We already knew how we felt at Denali height, but being an additional 1,000 meters higher was definitely a new experience. Unfortunately, Colin fell ill, so on October 1st, he headed out, and then it started getting even colder. There was snow at base camp, and this valley is deep and the peaks are so high right next to it that the sun would disappear behind the peaks about 4 different times. So we had 5 sunrises and 5 sunsets during the day. And each time the sun disappeared behind one of the peaks, it got so much colder. If any of you have done any winter climbing at high altitude, you'll know just how crippling the cold can be. It's pretty rough. So after Colin left, we headed up for our summit attempt. Here's a picture that we took with the drone, which we brought up to ABC, of West Central and Maine. Maine's kind of hidden behind a cloud, but it's a pretty rocky, pointy spire. And then we climbed the final green route on our big summit push. And when we popped over the west ridge there behind the large rock gendarme, there was so much deep snow that we were wallowing and wading through all the snow. And it took us a bit of a time to get through all of this snow and just keep on plunging upwards. This is Jeff in one of our bivvy spots. You can see Central on the right, and we're anchored into the Serac wall. And the views up here were just incredible. You could see all the 7,000, 8,000 meter peaks all around. And the weather we got was just incredible. I think October and fall has generally better weather, even though it's quite a bit colder. So most people who are climbing 8,000 meter peaks start their expeditions no later than mid-June, just for reference. And we were here and we summited in October. This is me approaching K6 West, and on the right-hand side, in the middle is K6 Main, and on the right is K6 Central. And in 2013, Ian Wellstead and Raphael Slavinsky made the first ascent of K6 West, and they won a POA d'Or for that climb. And then Graham Zimmerman and Scott Bennett made the second ascent in 2015. And this is a view of looking down towards the Lachute Glacier and the Nangma Glacier. We had climbed up on the right-hand side, the initial slope, then popped over the ridge, climbed the west face, and then this is looking down. And you can see all of these peaks. There are so many unclimbed peaks in this area. It's just mind-blowing. So when Graham and Scott climbed K6 West, they climbed this new route, the Southwest Ridge. Our route generally followed theirs, except for on the west face where we went up their rappel line. And it seemed more direct, but it is also in better conditions because there was probably more snow when we were there later in the year. They didn't have the opportunity to travel and traverse over K6 Central because they didn't have the weather for it. A storm was coming and they had to go back down, but they did have plans at first to go over to K6 Central, but it remained unclimbed. And it seems like it was one of the lower hanging fruit in the Karakoram as far as unclimbed peaks go. So when we talked to Graham, we asked him if he minded if we would go and send his route, and he said, "Oh, go send that bleep." So this was our line on K6 Central. It was so cold and so windy, I wasn't entirely sure if it would go, but then when we got to K6 West, we looked up at it and was like, oh, we've got this. And then the next day, when we went up to the base and looked up at the final slopes up to K6 Central, we're like, we can't not do this, we have to. And we were just so lucky with the incredible weather that we got. We could see all of the 4 8,000ers of the Baltoro Glacier. And here I am sitting on the final central summit of K6. And you can see my ice tools are hanging over this rocky spur, and I had 1 foot hanging over the Characusa Glacier, just like straight down for thousands of meters. And then on the other side was the Lachute Glacier. And it was just such an incredible experience to be able to be up there. And there's my foot hanging over the edge, and Jeff on the final rock fin. And we had to make sure that we were actually on the true summit. So we just kept traversing and traversing and traversing until we could see all the way over to K6 Main. And one of our stretch goals had been to continue climbing and make a complete traverse over to K6 Main. We even brought a rock gear set so that we could climb it if we had the weather. But with the cold and the short days, we just couldn't do it. But we got to climb K6 Central, a first ascent in the Patagonia Karakoram on our first Himalayan expedition. And I can't say this enough. No one is more surprised than me that we got to accomplish every single thing that we set out to do at the beginning of the year. Check, 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 check. So many checks. We had to change our plans a little bit from what we had anticipated. Although we got to stay in Patagonia for 2 months, we stayed in Chamonix for 6 months, 2 months longer than we expected. We changed our trip to go to the Karakoram and shortened it. And then we were finally hoping to finish up our trip in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, doing some sport climbing. But instead, we're in Hawaii, trying to soak up some of the sun and rewarm ourselves and our bones from our expedition to K6. So thank you so much, you guys. I'm so honored to be here to talk to you. This is one of my proudest moments, is being able to inspire other people. The tips that I have for you guys are pick some sort of goal that like you're really inspired to do. If you're not inspired to do it, then you're probably not going to be motivated enough to follow through. So pick something that really gets you going. And then the next step, figure out what will take you to that goal. Just envision it, see yourself there. And once you know the steps, commit to it and decide, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get it done and execute the plan. And remember along the way that you have to enjoy it and have fun while you're doing it, because the only time to enjoy your life is right now. So you can do it too. Just start planning. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, and I'll open it up to any questions that you guys have. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Priti. That was absolutely amazing. And I think there is just so many inspiring kind of photos and amazing things in there. And I think what makes it really special is that, you know, like you say, you were weekend warriors, and I think it's so much more relatable to see how we can get things done. And I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed that. There's lots of comments coming in already about how fantastic it was. Thank you. So yeah, Priti's very kindly decided she can stick around and take some questions, so that's fab. So if you want to ask a question, you can either stick it in the comments here on Zoom, or if you're watching on Facebook Live on our group, please do comment and then we can ask them as well. If you'd like to ask Priti a question in person, as it is, you can go down to the bottom, and under participants there's a little button that says raise your hand, and then we can come and unmute you and put your video on so you can ask a question. So thank you to those of you who've already written in some questions. So the first one is about from Sharon, asking how the lockdown in France was pretty strict. How did you keep fit enough when you were shut in your apartment in Chamonix to then go out and achieve your 6 climbs as soon as lockdown ended? A very good question, because I think at one point in France you were only allowed about 1 kilometre from your place of residence with a piece of paper at some point. So what did you do to keep fit?
That's absolutely true. We were only allowed 1 kilometer away from our place of residence for 1 hour. So I used that every single day. I think I ran more than I usually run, just because I was hardly allowed to do it. I ran that 1 hour in circles around my place every single day. And then I also started a uphill athlete training plan. This is an 8-week, amazingly, program to climb and train for alpine climbing in the bigger ranges. And my husband Jeff trained with me. And this is actually, it includes a lot of weight training, which I hadn't really done before. And I was really amazed how weight training increased my strength so much more than what I normally do with just like body weight strength training or just climbing more. And I could really feel that extra power when I was climbing with the pack on, for example. So there was a tree outside of our place that we could do like weighted hangs and ice tool hangs, and then a lot of like crunches and push-ups and squats with weight. And I highly recommend Uphill Athlete, especially for all of us who are stuck inside more than we would like to be these days.
Great. And strangely enough, there was a in our group today on Facebook, there was a discussion about getting hill fit for a bigger mountain. Uphill Athlete was also mentioned there, so it's I think it's a fantastic resource, isn't it? So that's great. I'll
add one more thing to that.
Oh yes, please do.
One more thing to add to that. So there are a couple of days. So Chamonix is a great place to train because we could still hike uphill pretty far and stay within the range we're allowed to. But even when it was raining, I had to stay fit. So I actually climbed the stairs something like 20 times just to get that uphill training. And obviously, if we could run around in the mountains, the best training for climbing is often climbing, because then we can train the skills as well. But when everyone like me works all the time, training at home is essential.
Great, yeah. Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat this year, aren't we? Everyone's, I think, kind of purchase of fingerboards has gone up as well. Susan asks, how did you get on with your non-climbing goals?
So some of our non-climbing goals was learning languages, doing handstands, paragliding. We obviously got paragliding done. During lockdown, Jeff and I practiced handstands, and I got much, much better at my handstands. I could already do them a little bit. And Jeff got a handstand, which is super cool, 8-week program. And then at each location we went to, English wasn't their primary language. So in Patagonia, I was practicing my my Spanish. I already know some Spanish. And then Jeff is really good at French, but I didn't know any French. So during lockdown, I practiced so much French, and I think I'm getting there. I'm getting better. And then of course in Pakistan, it's Urdu, and Urdu is pretty similar to Hindi, and I brushed up on that.
Great, yeah. I saw that on your slide about lockdown goals. Get abs was there twice. Obviously, that was a high priority.
It's all those core exercises during lockdown.
Yeah,
high priority. And that was on purpose. Got to double down on the abs.
That's great. So got a question about the planning that you had to do. So kind of the logistics and everything. There's quite a lot there in quite a short amount of time. What did you use to help you with the logistics of planning all your different trips and where you needed to be at what time?
We did a lot of Google Sheets and Google Documents, and also one of the hardest parts wasn't necessarily keeping track of the timing of doing things, but was keeping track of our budget, making sure that we were staying on budget, especially when we had to buy new ropes, new gear, new shoes. Those things started adding up. So keeping track of the budget and eating ramen when we had to was pretty essential. We'd set like a daily budget and every day stick to that daily budget. And that's a practice that we started when we were saving up for the sabbatical as well, to stick to a budget to save up to take the year off. It takes a lot of willpower, but hey, willpower is good for climbing too. So it's another thing to train. But as far as timeline, we had the rough timeline of where we wanted to be in each country before the year started. The only thing that really changed was in the second half of the year, going to Pakistan a bit later, which we just did pretty last minute. And then obviously Thailand didn't really work out. But we knew the general places we wanted to go. We wanted to be in Patagonia for the austral summer. So January, February was pretty good. We knew February was, pretty good for weather generally, but by March it was getting a little bit late. So we decided to fly to Chamonix in March, and then we wanted to spend like a couple different seasons in Chamonix. We brought our skis, but didn't really use them too much because everything shut down so quickly. But we wanted to be there for some of the winter season for ice climbing and skiing. Then we wanted to be there for the summer as well to enjoy the rock climbing. And each of these places we planned to stay for a longer period instead of jumping around to a bunch of different places. We wanted to like have a home base because we had so much gear for alpine climbing, rock climbing, ice climbing, skiing. We weren't that mobile. So we basically moved to a new country every couple of months, which really helped cut down on the costs too, because travel is part of the biggest expense. So if you guys do this, home base out of somewhere for a while and just plan on, going from there to do other adventures. And it's also more environmentally friendly. That's a plus.
Yeah, some really fantastic points there. Thank you. Someone's asked about how is your food management in the Karakoram?
That is a pretty hilarious question, because we ended up having way too much food.
Right.
Colin left about a month early, so we had food for an extra person for an extra month. We had plenty of food as far as that went. The cooks were great at taking care of all of that, and our manager Ali Saltoro also helped us organize that. Jeff and I are vegetarian, and Colin was gluten-free and dairy-free. So between all of us, it was a bit complicated. We decided we were going to order 3 eggs per person per day, and then we decided, well, let's make it 4, so we'll have a little extra. And then our expedition manager said, oh, well, we'll up it to 5, give them a little extra. And then when we went for a food restock, when someone ran down to the village to get a food restock, they didn't take off eggs. So we got another order of 1,000 eggs. So we just had like eggs coming out of our ears. We joked we had to have like an egg fight at the end and just throw them at each other. Didn't know what to do with them all. But as far as other food management went, we brought dehydrated meals to eat on the mountains, because it's really the best thing. You don't want to be trying to cook, while you're on the mountain. And for me, the easiest thing to eat is couscous, because it cooks super fast. You only have to add boiling water for 5 minutes. It's really easy to find everywhere. It's really easy to like shovel down if you're not actually hungry. and you can add as much olive oil as you want. I don't know, couscous is pretty great. The density of calories is awesome.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that answers the question. Thank you. Going back to the peaks that you chose to climb. So you said you were inspired by the Starlight and Storm's 6 North Faces. What other peaks or routes would you like to climb the Alps? Was it just those are the 6 North Faces you were going for, or did you have other kind of routes, places you wanted to experience with your first kind of trip over the European Alps, I guess?
The idea behind the 6 classic North Faces was to get an experience of the Alps and what the classic routes are. And it was also a kind of tour of different areas of Italy, of Switzerland, of rock climbing, of ice climbing. But once we were done with that, we wanted to go visit some of the classic other locations we had heard of that had really great sport climbing, bouldering, trad climbing. So we also traveled to Sayus, which was incredible to see such crushers. Like everyone there just blew my mind with how hard they climb. And then we also traveled to Verdon Gorge, and I would love to spend so much more time there. It's beautiful. We could go kayaking and paragliding and rock climbing all in the same day. We traveled down to southern France to Calanque. It was really nice to climb on the beach, do some awesome sport climbing. And of course, we checked out Fontainebleau, which I would love to go back to again. I like bouldering.
Great.
And of course, in Chamonix, there's so many things to climb. You could spend a whole season just in Chamonix and climb everything there. It's the center of alpine climbing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Someone's asked just on the Cima Grande, which route did you take?
Yeah. So on Cima Grande, we climbed the Comici di Mai route on the north face there. It was really fun rock climb.
Great. So last question, what's next for you? What's the plan next on your sabbatical, or do you have to head back soon? What have you got on?
I have to head back to Seattle soon. I have to start working again in January. I'm pretty excited to be working for Recurrent. I just recently got the job, so I'm pretty excited. I'm a software developer. If we so we're already planning, before we even took this sabbatical, we started planning the next sabbatical. And it would be super incredible to do some more rock climbing next time, so we can be a little more mobile and not have to bring all this gear, schlep it around the world. So I think focusing on rock climbing, increasing my rock climbing grade would be pretty fun. And then of course, there's so many places that we didn't get to go to on this sabbatical. I would love to go to New Zealand, to Turkey, to Austria, to, there's so many other places, to the UK and go climbing. And of course, there's so many places in the United States too. I could spend a whole season just climbing in the Canadian Rockies, for example. That seems pretty remote and the conditions dependent. And so being based there while you're watching conditions and weather, just ready to strike would be pretty awesome, pretty great.
Great. Well, thanks so much. We'll leave it there. If any of you guys have any more questions for Priti, she's actually written a little profile which can be found on our website. And also, if you do have any more questions, if you find us on Facebook or on Instagram and tag us in there, I'm sure we can ask her some more questions. It's very popular, but I'm aware of time, so thank you so much. We're really honoured to have you talk for us, and we hope that we can keep in touch in the future and hear about all the fantastic stuff that I'm sure is coming from the Alpine Vagabonds. So I'll hand back over now, and yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Priti, and thanks so much, Jenny, for handing over. For everyone who's still here, a little bit on the next in our series of talks. So quite exciting. We've got Margot Talbot coming up on the 8th of December, who Priti mentioned at the beginning of her chat. She is an author, a TED Talk speaker, and coach. And her talk, All That Glitters, is about a climber's journey through addiction and depression. It's going to be really, really fantastic. And then mark it in your calendars. 22nd of December, we are having a WAAC Christmas special. Everyone's invited. It's going to be ridiculous, as we do best. And then in the new year, we've got new routing in Mexico with Sally. So she's going to talk about setting new routes, the drive behind this type of adventure for putting up new lines, and what it's like to lead a team when there's so much uncertainty. And then we're moving on at the end of January to a talk with one of my besties, Solani. If you haven't read her Black People Can't Ski article, it is really, really fantastic. She's going to lead a discussion exploring reasons for a lack of diversity in adventure sports. And then the beginning of February, we have Slovenian Adventures with Michaela Tokzak. I hope I'm saying that right. And she's going to share stories about her adventures and the lessons that she's learned in the Julian and the Chemic Alps of Slovenia. And then there's actually a couple more talks after that, but this is the next set to come. So please mark your calendars, join us. Again, I think Louise mentioned quite a lot of this at the beginning, make sure you're following us on Facebook or Instagram, sign up to the newsletter. It's the best way to get information about what talks are coming up. And when we're able to have meets again, all the information will be there. We also wanted to include all the information for Priti and her husband, Jeff, the Alpine Vagabonds. So make sure that you're following them on Instagram. Again, go to their website, and they've also got this 6 classic Alps North faces on Vimeo, where they are being showcased. So make sure to follow them, because you'll just continue to see about their fantastic adventures. And another, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that everyone's all right in lockdown wherever you are in the world. If you're in lockdown or if you're not in lockdown, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time for Margot's talk. Have a great evening, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, Priti. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.